Welcome back. You here at Goldberg. Today we'll be talking about Dr. Jordan Peterson and his brilliant advice about how you can get a woman, especially if you're an incel. I've said before I have nothing against him as a person. I don't believe he's a malicious actor. His basic philosophy of fix your own problems before you confront the world isn't entirely without merit. However, when he starts addressing young men, I can't help but feel he's streaming from this position as a vanguardist for bourgeois liberal society. In fact, Peterson has admitted to being a classical liberal. And if you look at the definition of F.A. Hayek, he says liberalism is a system under which the individual is the ultimate arbiter or judge for their actions, moral decisions, and behavior. Well, and I'm not saying these men support the outcome, but if you tether that to social media, economic emancipation of women, this culture of consumerism and worshiping the narcissistic ego of people online, it's going to devolve. It's going to become hedonistic and it's going to self-destruct because there are no controls. There's no restrictions. There's no consequences or accountability. A woman who is in her 20s and gets an IU implant and she has a decent job, so she doesn't have to find a guy to just be a provider, she can screw a bunch of dudes on Tinder until she's 30. And then she can still find a guy who makes good money to marry her and have kids. A guy who's top 5 or 10%, he's like, oh, look at all these booties I could smash. Well, no, I've got to think about society, brah. No, it's your fast life strategy interest to revel in it because you're mortal. You don't know, how long you've got. And you're not going to face consequences. In earlier times, a woman who was promiscuous would not get married. She'd be ostracized, maybe forced to be a prostitute. A man who was pumping and dumping a woman, defiling her, would be at least fined, if not beaten up or killed. But there are no outcomes that are negative for people being, just pursuing whatever they want. Academic agents said since the 60s, what has been seen as a maximum ideal is this concept that the liberation of the individual, especially sexually. You see that now with the LGBT backwoods booty patrol movement. So this is something that I don't believe Peterson can answer, and you definitely see it in this video, which is a compilation of his, selected wisdom by a Peterson fan. I'm going to play it and respond, and Peterson fans, who are mostly very nice dimewits, are going to say, oh, it's out of context. You have to watch 20 more hours. You have to read maps of meaning. You're too low IQ. Is it that the person's too low IQ or you're too stupid to explain it? That's how we should really frame stuff, okay? But let's just delve in. It'll be educational. It'll be a good video, I think.
I would say to young men who are irritated at women is, if you're irritated at women, as a class of creature, there's something wrong with you because they're right. You're wrong. They're right to not pick you. If they're not picking you, it's because they're right.
So right there, like every red pillar, every PUA, every self-improver, he blames men. It's this caricature of the morbidly obese incel in the mom's basement eating ready meals, watching porn, and hating women. There's no possibility that there are guys out there who are actually in good shape, have money, have decent social skills, but are still coming across this nonsense. That's not acceptable because it doesn't help put people on the hamster wheel. Well, you have to be distracted from reality by all this self-improvement. And granted, Peterson will acknowledge other factors. Like one of the biggest most singular issues is the economic emancipation of women, which started a few decades ago. That's the big reason why so many dudes are essentially shut out today. But if he admits that certain things are actually beyond your control, some people are going to lose interest in doing self-improvement, and so he won't have the same markets. It's that simple. It's not complicated.
Wow.
Now, that might get...
Wow.
I know that's a terrible thing to say, and I know perfectly well. It wasn't like I was particularly successful with girls when I was young. So I know
Yeah,
what
we
that
know,
rejection
we
is
know.
like. I know what that fear is like. I don't know it as well as some men know it because I wasn't rejected outright.
Oh, so you were not rejected outright. You have no real solidarity with these people. You grew up in a totally different period. You married a woman decades ago. separate social spectrum back then. You didn't have to deal with social media. You didn't have to deal with dating apps. You didn't have to deal with really the decline of social skills in general. See, I'm over 6 feet. I'm an okay looking normie, right? I've got decent social skills. I can make people laugh. I can get women on occasion, dating apps or in person if I really put the effort in. But I still see this like the decline in cognitive ability or just the wherewithal for women to actually express interest has gone down. Like IOIs are something that women knew how to do back in the day, less and less. They just seem like their brains have been fried by TikTok. Um, and now think of a guy who's shorter. Think of a guy who's less good looking. What is he going through? Peterson doesn't understand that. He can't even imagine that whole experience, which is why he's just going to tell you to go back to self-improvement because that'll distract you from the world.
So, but what you have to understand is that what do you expect from women?
Just don't be a land
If you
whale.
got pregnant because you had sex, you'd be pretty damn choosy too.
I mean, why should she want to have a baby with you? What do you have to offer? Now, look, I wrote the book Understanding Overcoming the Black Pill. I know that even in the realm of hooking up, the elements of, the basic reproductive process, looking for good traits for a mate, they do play a role. It's sometimes warped by stuff like birth control, but it does play a role. Nevertheless, a lot of women nowadays do not want to have babies. They're not consciously looking at that. They're just looking for a good, a guy who is attractive. They have access to a lot more because of dating apps, social media, whatever. They have jobs, so they don't need to settle for a provider like in the past. You're not really acknowledging this stuff in any serious way because it goes against the core philosophy that it's within your control. You can change anything as long as you just listen to your heart and buy 12 rules for life. That's what they do.
So, clue in a bit. And then, well, don't they find you attractive? Well,
No.
maybe you're not.
Exactly.
Have you paid attention to how you dress? Do you have a plan? Are you as educated as you could be? Are you a liar? Are you a rabid pornography user? Because maybe that's undermining your motivation to seek out a woman and grow yourself up. It's like, if you're rejected constantly and you're out there really trying, because that's another thing to ask yourself is, well, how many women have you actually asked out? And are you so sure that you're not picking women who will certainly reject you because you're trying to bat out of your league? Because you might be.
See, so there it is. Now, the pornography stuff has, value to it. You probably shouldn't be using porn. It's destructive. But he's saying, oh, are you this high-value man? Are you good enough for women? Not that women have to change themselves for you. No, you're not good enough for women. You have to do X, Y, Z. You have to be, maxing it out in the gym, have a bunch of money, dress really nicely, drive a nice car, and then maybe a chick will pay attention to you. Then he says, oh, well, it's still a numbers game. You've got to talk to a bunch of them. So now you have to orient a lot of your life around meeting women and it's time consuming. Meeting women, dealing with their emotional fluctuations, the cycle, texting back and forth. It is very time consuming. Now you have to orient your life around women to get one. And then, oh, well, you have to lower your standards still because you're just, game doesn't work. You have to lower your standards. That's the excuse. But then later on, as we're going to see here, let me just fast forward a bit.
Trouble, that. Be a little stronger, dress a little better, speak a little more clearly, aim a little higher.
Yeah, looks max, gym max, social max. Aim a little higher. So couldn't we take from that you need to go for women out of your league, or is that different? You have to be this high value man, but then you still have to lower your standards because you're not good looking enough for women that you want. So you have to still lower your standards. The problem is that because of the world today, a lot of guys can't even get a woman in their league because a lot of those women are pursuing, upper tier men, or those dudes aren't perceived to have a high enough online status. So all this comes down to essentially gesture maxing. I was thinking about it because a couple of years back, I was like, all right, let me listen to what these PUAs say. I'll make an Instagram. And I create this page and I'm taking pictures and I stopped and I realized I'm just taking pictures of random BS or trying to see things that are funny so that maybe I get followers. and I tickle the fancy of this creature who's never actually satisfied. They are never satisfied. They are never happy. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar, okay? You're doing all these things, orienting your life, having to put these resources into something. And instead of a guy like Peterson maybe saying to women, you need to change. You need to actually change. You need to lower your standards, which, by the way, it's not even really lowering your standards. It's just being realistic. You need to have a more rational approach. But he won't do that because that's not socially acceptable. What society says is criticize men. Any man who complains or says there's something wrong is a loser, because men still are today seen as utilitarian, as utilities. They're disposable, right? So it's not really surprising.
And practice that, and that'll work. Now,
I know it's more difficult. That'll work. What if it doesn't work? Well, then do more self-improvement. Get back on the treadmill, and that'll kind of sort things out.
about women, I've seen that in men. I went out with a group of men who were having trouble with their wives, and they'd gone off to this couples retreat, and it was mostly rubbish, although they were trying a bit to get their lives together. And I spent a whole day with them. There were 3 of them, and one of them was a guy that I'd known for quite a while, and every single word he said was a lie. And all these 3 did the whole day was complain about their wives. And I thought, what the hell's wrong with you guys? You picked them. They're these women you picked, and maybe they have their flaws, but they're your wives. And that's how you talk about them?
You picked them. Well, isn't it that women select men? That's how the actual mating process goes. But Jordan, with respect, have you ever heard of this whole concept where you marry a woman who's really nice, you have a great dating life, and then after you get married, she just declines, gains weight, becomes nasty to be around? That's a very real phenomenon. Sometimes people act, sometimes people change over time. Maybe they're complaining because they're like, what happened to the girl that I knew? Well, his reaction would probably be, well, you have to do more self-improvement. Why aren't you out in the gym? Why aren't you a great father and husband? Because that's, again, it's your fault. You need to solve the problem. It's not anything else, anything that was beyond your control. You're not in this simulation at some level being taken advantage of by a social structure that is telling you or promising you things that don't really matter anymore because it doesn't enforce anything.
Sir.
If you're a guy, making $50,000 a year or $60,000 a year, and you're doing relatively well, that the women in your cohort who are similar partners to you may not desire you. Instead of wanting a partner making 60, want a partner making 80. So what would you say to those guys?
Mostly I'd say that was an excuse.
No, it's not. And this shows how you're not serious, my friend, because that's what the data shows us. This is why women are very conscious of status, all right? Even if you have a guy, let's say he's a mechanic and he makes $120,000 a year, he's a successful mechanic. There are women who have a master's degree and work in HR, and they don't want that mechanic because even though he makes more money or he makes good money, he doesn't rise to the same level. Oh, he's probably uneducated. He doesn't have a degree. He doesn't dress this way. He's got dirt on his hands, right? Contrary to the manosphere telling you that women want these working class men, a bunch of BS. I've seen this directly, right? You can be a guy I make good money, but I don't have a high status position, right? There are some women, even though, yes, you're doing well financially, you don't rise to the kind of picturesque level of what she wants to be with. On the economic scale. And in this country, we are, of course, conscious of class to varying degrees, depending on the community. So he doesn't really have an answer except to distract you with going back to self-improvement, and it's your fault, you're making excuses.
But I wouldn't go farther than that because, I don't know how to answer those questions in some ways at a collective level, which is why I focus on the individual. If someone came to me and told me that, the first thing I would do is listen to them for 10 sessions just to find out what they're thinking and to find out what the problem actually is, because they think they know what the problem is. It's these picky women, and that could be the problem. For them it might be. Maybe there's a demographic issue or a community issue that I don't understand. So I wouldn't assume that I knew what the problem was, but those sorts of things, in my experience, have to be solved at a high level of detail, like at high resolution. So let's say you are having trouble finding a mate, and you think, well, I'm reasonably symmetrical, I'm in decent physical condition, I'm young, I have a decent salary, but still, okay, well, that's a deep dive issue. I don't know what's wrong.
Do you notice how he doesn't really answer a question? Now you could say, well, but he's doing the Socratic method. He wants you to find the solution. No, he doesn't know the answer. Because if you find a person there who has, checked all the boxes, and yet they're still finding it very difficult because of factors beyond their control, what do you have to do? Oh, I don't know. Do more self-improvement. You got to go to a therapist. That's his other solution. Go to a therapist. He doesn't know. He's just talking gibberish. But to the person that is not familiar with how intellectuals operate, if you haven't read academic papers, I can read an academic paper and I can see, okay, this is all filler. It'd be like 75% is just filler, like long run-on sentences, whatever. If you don't understand that, you'll think they're brilliant. Look how he doesn't just answer the question. He just leads you on this rabbit trail. And then in the end, you don't have a clear solution of anything.
Have to talk about that, and I do mostly listen. It's like, you seem okay, so why don't you have a partner? Well, that's a deep mystery. It's really a deep mystery. It's nothing trivial. There's no simple solution to that.
Exactly.
And so again, that's why I don't really do sociology in some sense.
Yeah, you don't do sociology because it's a lot harder to market sociology as a much larger problem that has to be solved through cooperation and coordination. Not just the government legislating, mind you, but actually communities. Much harder to do that, right? It doesn't really step in line with a consumerist agenda, with a big business, with, flooding the country with a bunch of people who have nothing in common with the native citizens. All that agenda, which you in part support because, that system tolerates you, bourgeois liberal society tolerates you, Jordan Peterson, because it doesn't see you as a threat. That's why you're going to focus constantly on the individual. Oh, stop blaming them. It's all about you. It's all about you, right? So again, Peterson's not a bad person. I know he's starting to find God. I don't have anything against him. I don't in any way try to hate on him. I'm saying he doesn't really get it. Even the religious answer, which has some role. I went to Rush's church recently, and there were some young trad women, nice with the veils, all that. A lot of them, of course, already in relationships or married, but I was turning around because there was a line of people kind of crunched out the door because it's a small church. And I saw all these young men, many of them, okay looking normies, not that tall, whatever. And I'm saying of the few women that are here, you're still going to have it's skewed to the advantage of women, even in a lot of trad communities. And I keep seeing this every church I go to. The men are the ones trying to re-embrace traditionalism and religion, whereas women are sometimes tagging along. I know there was some chick on TikTok recently she's gotten famous for promoting being a stay-at-home mom, the housewife life. But the truth is, you're going to have, you might get religion, but you're going to be a religious incel for a lot of these dudes, unless they can be okay with rescuing some chick from her degeneracy and turning her into a trad wife, which many of them may have to end up doing. I hate to say this, because of the numbers and the environment that we're operating under. So it is very complicated. And this is why when I wrote the Understanding Overcoming the Black Pill book, I was very honest. I got a lot of hatred from positivity experts because of this. I still get people who try to hit piece me because they're angry that I don't tell them what they want to hear. Not all men are going to get the pumpkin turned into the carriage, Cinderella, with an ATM welfare. Not everyone's going to get that. Some dudes are probably going to end up having to pay for it realistically, unless society changes dramatically. They're going to have to end up paying for it. They may have to move. They may have to settle themselves with, look, I'm not going to have the white picket fence. Now, if you're a self-improvement guru, you got to be careful saying that, because then people will say, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't bother with this self-improvement if it's not going to get me what I want, what you've marketed to me. So this is a serious issue. And that's why, again, for a lot of guys, you can tell them self-improvement this, self-improvement that, be red-pilled, maintain frame, but at the end of the day, what are they looking forward to? What is the social plane of sorts? It's like that old Daughtry song, you know? Yeah, he's coming just a little bit late. He got stuck in divorce court, losing his estate. Yeah, if life was a movie, it wouldn't end like this, left without a simp. A lot of you dumbasses don't even pay attention to the messages in mainstream media, what they're trying to inform you about. So this is just my point, right? You want to do self-improvement, you want to say it's about the individual, that's fine. That's a starting point. But you need to have the data. You need to be a realist, because otherwise you're going to come out the other side of probably 30 and say, I'm still not really having many results. What's wrong, Dr. Peterson?
Well, I guess you should just buy another book.